Disinformation knows no borders, and today the stakes seem higher than ever. Welcome to Truth Talks, a bold podcast series tackling the challenges of fake news and propaganda head-on. Join us for engaging short conversations with experts from all EU member states and Ukraine as we uncover the truth behind dominant disinformation trends and explore the strategies shaping Europe's fight against manipulation. In this episode, we are zooming in on France. Today's guest is Vincent Couronne, co-founder and CEO of Les Surligneurs, French online media specializing in fact-checking. Welcome to Truth Talks.
Hello, Carolina.
Great to have you here. France has been one of the pioneers in the fight against disinformation in Europe. From your perspective, what are the dominant disinformation narratives circulating in France?
Well, right now, I would say that the most popular narratives circulating in France are the ones that we usually see now for more than 2 years, and which are about mostly the war in Ukraine, but also any geopolitic, chaotic situation in the world where we saw a lot of disinformation circulating about the presence of the French military in Ukraine, of what's happening in the West Bank, for example, as well. So all of this is something that we see a lot and we have to debunk and fact check a lot every day, I have to say. But also, from time to time, then when there is like a major political event in the news, we can see, of course, that a lot of disinformation circulating about it. Most recently is the trial, the decision against Marine Le Pen in the case of the European assistance and corruption in that situation.
And could you spill any beans about the legal case against the Marine Le Pen? Because it's something that is special, very special to the French disinformation landscape. And also, as you are the head of Les Surligneurs, which actually is dealing not only with fact-checking, but with the legal fact-checking. So maybe you can tell us much more than we can know.
Yeah, sure. Actually, the disinformation circulating about Marine Le Pen's trial was mostly about the conditions in which the decision was made. For example, the tribunal has been, accused of making a decision only by one judge, which is wrong because actually 3 judges make these decisions. And there were also accusations that the fact that a politician is sanctioned with ineligibility sanction is something which exists only in France, which is completely wrong, of course, because you can find that almost everywhere in Europe. And so there was some disinformation piece like this, mostly with the aim to decredibilize the decision of the justice. And yeah, so that's what we do mostly at Les Surligneurs. So we do fact-checking, but we're specializing into legal fact-checking. So we verify what politicians say according to the law. Is it true when we read the law, or is it not true? Maybe sometimes more specific or more complex. So yeah, that is what we do, and we are the only ones in France doing that. I mean, being specialized in that kind of thing, even in Europe, I think, actually.
It's actually the first time that I heard the phrase legal fact checking. Maybe it's a sign of an ignorance, but usually the media outlets that I'm consulting are specializing in fact checking, debunking in general. So it's the first time we have pleasure of speaking to an expert in the legal one. So are there many more instances of legal cases that you are looking at in France?
Yeah, sure. Actually, most of the legal disinformation which circulates is disinformation which aims at weakening the credibility of the public institutions. When, for example, you have disinformation which say that the government makes decisions which are quite hard to believe sometimes. So, for example, what I could say is disinformation about international treaties like trade agreements between the EU and Mercosur. There was also disinformation about, for example, the fact that the government took a decree which bans the French citizens to use the the water coming from the rain and falling into the garden. So you understand that obviously that's false. But still, a lot of people believe that also because it circulates within mostly far-right conspiracy groups online. And some of these narratives are very powerful, and also very powerful because they are pushed by French politicians, not very central French politicians, I have to say, not very famous ones, but they have kind of an audience on the internet, and also pushed by foreign interference as well. So we try to fight against this disinformation which weakens the rule of law and democracy.
I must say that this legal aspect of looking at politics in the media, for me personally, has become quite characteristic to France, especially as quite recently one of my students from France, Julie, she was mentioning how often the law is being used as a way of political mobilization by populist politicians, like, for example, Jordan Bardella and the one that you mentioned, Marine Le Pen. Have you noticed such a tendency that might be maybe more special to France than other countries?
Yeah, completely. And I would say that one of the favorite targets of populists is European law, such as EU law, but also the European Convention of Human Rights. And also there is a group in France which is growing and every day, which we are monitoring very closely, which is we can call them in English, the sovereign citizens, which is a trend coming from the UK, but also from the US, where you have people who think and who say that the law, which is adopted by the parliament, has no legitimacy, and that even the government or the president have no legitimacy because of historical reasons, and they don't feel that they are bound by French law. So they think that they are sovereign themselves, and they do not have to respect the laws of the republic or of the state. And that's something which is a growing movement in France. We even saw recently the police organizing a dawn raid into a building owned by these people. It's becoming maybe quite serious at some point.
Looking at this from the more general perspective, do you see any objective, in a way, institutions anymore that can enjoy trust above political divisions? Because we used to have, for example, politicians, experts, juries, and courts, the media that used to enjoy at least some extent of universal general trust. Are we past these times?
I think we are, at least in France. Media outlets are one of the least trusted organizations in France by the people. Every poll, every year, every study show it. Even the institutions, especially the national institutions, where the parliament, the government, the president don't have, are even far from having trust of the majority of the people. Actually, those who are most trusted as politicians in France are the mayors, like local institutions, local government, closer to the people, more trusted, and at least more than and much more than other types of institutions, and more than the media outlets. But at the same time, in polls in France, you see that a vast majority of the French say that they want to have access to more media outlets, to more pluralism of media outlets, and they want the media outlets to investigate, to fight against disinformation. So even though they say they don't trust or they have little trust in the media outlets, they want them to play their role as bringing the fact.
Let's now turn into the topic of the actors who stay behind disinformation, misinformation, its creation and its spreading, as it's not always the same actor that creates and spreads. So, which actors are behind the disinformation problem in France? You've mentioned especially far-right conspiracy theorists and their misinformation, disinformation being spread further by some quite fringe politicians. But can you tell me about more actors, be it state actors, company actors, political actors, and whatnot?
Actually, you have plenty of actors pushing some narratives and spreading disinformation. The first type of actors is just us, normal citizens, everyone on social media, everyone who on TV, on the radio, who is not very rigorous, not doing a great job, like some journalists, I have to say, some politicians, or like ordinary citizens. Everyone expressing themselves in the public debate actually spreads disinformation. Because in France, there is a very low quality of media education, media literacy. So that's a big issue, to be honest. The other major, I mean, you have also like major disinformation spreaders, like professional spreaders of disinformation. And these are some politicians, I would say, as I noticed, as I said before, like some fringe politicians, such as mostly in far-right sovereignist or populist politicians, such as, for example, Florian Philippot, who is very, and that's not, I mean, that's not a coincidence, who is very close to Russian narratives, for example, and he spreads them in France through social media, because you also have like foreign interference, clearly, which pushes narratives. We've seen recently an investigation which has been published by NewsGuard on the fact that Russian interference this last month, I mean, held an operation in France, which apparently comes from Russia, and apparently from an operation which has been already held in the US or in Germany, called Storm 1516. That's the name of the special operation of foreign interference, which comes from Russian activists who wants to spread narratives. And what they do is that they feed GenAI tool, generative artificial intelligence tools such as ChatGPT or Le Chat by Mistral in France. And so that when you send a request to ChatGPT, then in the answer you receive, you will have this information coming directly from Russian interference. So that's something that we are being more and more aware of in France. And that's an issue that we're starting to address.
How would you define the specificity, any unique characteristics of the disinformation landscape that is specific to France?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a tricky one. I would say that the disinformation landscape in France is like the one in most of the Western countries in Europe. I would say the same as the one in Germany, in Spain, Italy, etc. So something which is specific to France, I would say, is that there are a lot of different types of actors fighting disinformation, such as fact checkers with traditional, long-established media outlets like AFP, the news agency, or specialized fact checkers like Les Surligneurs, for example. But you also have public agencies and research centers who study the narrative circulating foreign interference. One of the biggest actors in recent years is Viginium. And Viginium is an agency from the Ministry of the Army, so the Defense Ministry, and which is very active into identifying foreign interference operations. And also a lot of research centers in universities, foundations who study this phenomenon. So it's an ecosystem which is quite dense and also pushed by, I would say, like a proactive public policy from the government.
I would say that from my point of view, French people are excelling at critical thinking and generally criticality, but critical thinking as well. And taking these characteristics, how vulnerable are the French people to disinformation, misinformation, in your view?
I think the French people is highly vulnerable to disinformation because we have yes, in France we like to criticize all the time and to have like a critical thinking very rooted in our in our mind, in our habits. But I wouldn't say that it's a very methodological critical thinking. It's rather than criticizing just to criticize. But France is very bad, for example, we see that in the studies and polls, it's very bad in mathematics or scientific reasoning and that kind of thing. Things which are very, very useful for a good critical thinking. But not everything is bad here. And there is a study from Fondation Descartes, which has been released a few months ago, about how vulnerable is the French people towards foreign interference and foreign narratives. And actually, the study shows that the French do not accept, in their vast majority, they do not buy foreign narratives pushed by Russia, China, Algeria, etc. So that's good news, but we could do much better.
Okay, so finally, you have mentioned that quite a lot is being done to counter disinformation in France, but maybe not always it's so effective as you would like to. And what, in your view, what more should be done? What more would you recommend?
I would say two things, mostly. One of them is media literacy, media and information literacy, which has to be done not only at schools or university, but also for everyone. Everyone is susceptible of buying disinformation. The other thing I would say which is important, is to make the platforms accountable for making it easy and so easy to spread disinformation and all sorts of narratives. But that's the DSA, so European regulation. But France can play a role in that and should push the Commission into implementing the DSA strongly against platforms. So that I would say that the two things we have to do better.
Thank you so much for this constructive answer. And generally, that brings us to the end of our talk about the French disinformation landscape. Thank you so much for this fascinating discussion.
Thank you, Carolina.
Truth Talk series is part of the project Guardians of Truth, fact-checking during Poland's EU presidency, which is supported by European Media and Information Fund, managed by Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation.